This is the story of how one of Hollywood's biggest stars, Brad Pitt, walked into what seemed like a routine interview to promote his new film, but found himself at the center of a heated verbal showdown. Instead of a professional conversation, he faced unexpected personal attacks that turned his appearance on the show into one of the most scandalous moments in television history. In this first part, we'll dive into how it all began and how Brad Pitt, expecting to discuss his latest project, was blindsided by Joy Behar's aggressive questions, leading to a tense confrontation. The morning at the View studio started like any other. Brad Pitt arrived to promote his new dramatic thriller, greeting everyone backstage with his signature charm and warmth. Whoopi Goldberg opened the show with her usual grace, introducing the guests to thunderous applause from the audience. Brad settled into his seat, exuding calm confidence, ready to talk about his work. Sarah Haynes kicked off the interview with enthusiasm. "Brad, tell us about the preparation for these incredible scenes in the film. How did you get ready for such challenging roles?" she asked, genuinely curious. Brad smiled, his eyes lighting up. "Sarah, the preparation was intense. I worked with the best directors and trainers to really dive into the role. For me, it's all about authenticity. When you're fully immersed in the character, the audience feels it. That's what I love about acting." Sonny Hostin leaned forward with interest. "And what was it like working with your co-stars on set? They were phenomenal, right?" Brad grew even more animated. "Oh, absolutely. Everyone on that set brought their A-game. When you're filming intense scenes, you need complete trust in your team. We became like a family, and that collaboration made the film special." The conversation flowed smoothly and naturally. Brad shared amusing behind-the-scenes stories, and the audience was captivated, hanging on his every word. However, Joy Behar, who had been silent the entire time, sat with her arms crossed, her face betraying a calculated expression. For nearly 10 minutes, she hadn't said a word, but her silence spoke volumes. Finally, Joy leaned forward, and the shift in her posture instantly changed the atmosphere in the studio. Brad paused mid-sentence, noticing her movement, and the other hosts fell silent. Joy fixed him with a cold stare and spoke with a sharp tone that cut through the warm vibe. "Brad, let's talk about something I'm sure our viewers really want to know about. You've long supported certain charitable initiatives and foundations, but some of them raise serious questions. There are opinions that you use your fame to promote organizations criticized for questionable practices. How can you justify supporting initiatives that many say cause harm?" The studio fell silent. Sarah's mouth dropped open in shock. Sonny shifted uncomfortably, and Whoopi's eyebrows shot up as she glanced between Joy and Brad. Brad's smile vanished, his face turning serious, his posture guarded. He leaned back in his chair, his jaw tightening as he processed the unexpected attack. When he spoke, his voice was calm but firm. "Joy, I came here today to talk about my film and my work. I believe in freedom of choice, and I have the right to support the initiatives I find meaningful. I don't think it's appropriate to attack someone's personal beliefs on national television, especially when they have nothing to do with the project I'm here to promote." Joy leaned in closer, her voice growing even more aggressive. "But Brad, you can't just brush off serious concerns. There are people who claim these organizations have caused them harm, that they've lost contact with their families, faced pressure, and manipulation. As someone who publicly supports these initiatives, don't you feel any responsibility for the pain they may have caused?" Brad was clearly trying to keep his composure, but his patience was being tested. "Joy, I think you're misinformed about a lot of things. I don't support any actions that harm people, and I'm outraged at the suggestion that I've somehow caused pain by doing what I believe in." Joy's response was swift and sharp. "Outraged? Really, Brad? Is that outrage because you're being asked tough questions about organizations accused of serious violations? Or is it because you can't answer those questions?" Whoopi tried to intervene. "Maybe we should?" But Joy cut her off with a sharp look and a dismissive wave. "No, Whoopi, this is important. Brad came on our show, and our viewers deserve honest answers." Brad gripped the arms of his chair, his face showing restrained anger. "Joy, you're being disrespectful not just to me but to millions of people who share my views. You're taking isolated cases and using them to smear entire initiatives. That's what prejudice is, and I won't sit here and let you do it." Joy smiled coldly. Brad, I'm not attacking your right to believe what you want. I'm questioning your judgment in supporting organizations that, according to many, have caused pain to others. And honestly, your reaction right now proves I've hit a nerve. If your beliefs were as pure as you claim, you wouldn't be so defensive. Anger crept into Brad's voice, becoming more noticeable. Defensive? You've ambushed me on national television, attacking my personal beliefs, and you call my reaction defensive? Joy, what you're doing is creating division where there doesn't need to be any. This first part of the story only begins to unravel the tension that erupted between Brad Pitt and Joy Behar. Did Brad do the right thing by standing up for himself? Or did Joy have the right to ask such pointed questions? Share your thoughts in the comments and stay tuned for the continuation of this incredible story. In the first part, we witnessed how Brad Pitt's interview on The View spiraled from a friendly discussion about his new film into a tense confrontation with Joy Behar. Her aggressive questions about the charitable initiatives Brad supports put the actor in an uncomfortable position, and the studio atmosphere became electric. In this second part, we'll recount how the conflict reached its peak when Brad Pitt lost his patience, and Joy Behar refused to back down, pushing the situation to a boiling point. Joy Behar didn't relent, her voice growing sharper. Brad, you call it prejudice, but I'm just asking questions that concern many people. You use your fame to promote organizations accused of serious violations. Don't you think it's your responsibility as a public figure to address these accusations? Brad Pitt, his anger increasingly evident, leaned forward, his voice cold and sharp. Joy, you're not asking questions. You're making accusations without any evidence to back them up. You want me to defend myself against rumors and speculation you're presenting as facts. That's not journalism. It's bullying. Joy smiled, but a spark of triumph flashed in her eyes. Bullying? Brad, I'm holding you accountable. That's what journalists do when someone with your fame supports controversial initiatives. You can't just dodge tough questions by hiding behind your charm. Brad clenched his fists, his voice quiet but dangerously sharp. Joy, you call this journalism? You ambush me on national television, attack my beliefs without a shred of concrete evidence. You want a show, not the truth. Sunny Hostin tried to intervene, her voice trembling with tension. Maybe we could go back to talking about the film. But Joy cut her off sharply. No, Sunny, this is important. Brad uses his platform to promote organizations that, according to many, have harmed people. Our viewers deserve to know the truth. Brad stood up abruptly, his face flushed with anger. The truth? Joy, you're not looking for the truth. You're looking for a sensation. You're accusing me of things I have no part in, and you're doing it in front of millions of people. This isn't journalism, it's slander. Joy shot up from her seat, now standing face to face with Brad. Slander? Brad, the truth is a defense against slander. And the truth is that the organizations you support have a documented history of issues. There are testimonies, there are court cases, there are people who've shared their pain. Brad fired back sharply. Documented by whom, Joy? Disgruntled individuals with personal grudges? Journalists chasing sensational headlines? You take isolated stories, strip them of context, and use them to smear entire initiatives. That's not truth. It's manipulation. Whoopi Goldberg, who had been trying to stay neutral, finally interjected with firmness in her voice. Okay, I think we need to take a pause and go to a commercial break. But Joy spun around to face her. No, Whoopi, we're not taking a break. Brad needs to answer for his actions. Brad, who had started to remove his microphone, paused and looked directly at Joy. Answer for what, Joy? For believing in something that gives my life meaning? For supporting initiatives that I believe make the world better? You're accusing me of crimes I didn't commit and calling it journalism. This isn't journalism, it's a witch hunt. Joy, her fury now unmistakable, raised her voice to a near shout. A witch hunt? Brad, I'm asking you direct questions about organizations accused of serious violations. If you can't answer them, that's your problem, not mine. Brad tossed his microphone onto the chair and took a step toward the edge of the stage. Joy, I came here to talk about my film, a project I'm proud of, made with a team that poured their hearts into it. Instead, I've been subjected to an attack on my beliefs based on rumors and lies. I won't be your victim. Joy, refusing to back down, followed him, her voice trembling with indignation. Victim. Brad, the victims are the people who've suffered because of the organizations you support. The victims are those who've lost their families, who've faced pressure and manipulation. You can't just walk away when the conversation gets uncomfortable. Brad stopped at the edge of the stage and turned to face her one last time, his voice cold and final. Joy, this stopped being a conversation the moment you decided to attack my beliefs instead of talking about my work. You're using people's pain to create a scandal and boost your ratings. That's not journalism. It's exploitation. He turned to the audience, addressing the camera directly. Ladies and gentlemen, I came here today to talk about a film made by talented people who worked incredibly hard. Instead, I've been subjected to an attack based on prejudice and lies. I won't be part of this. With those words, Brad Pitt walked off the stage, leaving Joy Behar standing alone, still shouting after him as the cameras continued to roll. The studio audience sat in stunned silence, witnessing the aftermath of one of the most explosive interviews in television history. Whoopi, finally, spoke quietly. Well, I guess we definitely need that commercial break now. This scandal became a turning point that left everyone questioning. Did Brad do the right thing by walking off, or should he have stayed to keep defending himself? Were Joy Behar's questions legitimate, or did she cross a line by turning the interview into a personal attack? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't miss the latest updates on this story. It was a moment no one could have predicted. An event that forever changed the perception of talk shows and revealed the true power of dignity in the face of toxic attacks. Clint Eastwood, a Hollywood legend with a 60-year career, stepped onto the set of The View to promote his new film. Expecting a friendly conversation, he was instead ambushed by Joy Behar, a host notorious for her provocative style. What began as a routine interview spiraled into a shocking confrontation that stunned the studio, the audience, and the world. Subscribe and leave a comment, because this story will blow you away. The studio of The View buzzed with anticipation. Blinding spotlights flooded the stage, and the audience, hundreds strong, hummed with excitement. Cameras whirred, producers in headsets scrambled to check scripts, and backstage, a palpable tension hung in the air like the calm before a storm. The atmosphere was thick, as if everyone sensed something extraordinary was about to unfold. The familiar round tables where the hosts sat were ready for another episode, but all eyes were on him, Clint Eastwood. Eastwood entered the studio with his signature effortless confidence. At 95, he remained an imposing figure, tall with deep wrinkles telling stories of decades in film and a piercing gaze that could cut through steel. His gray suit was impeccable, and a faint smile betrayed the calm of a man who had seen it all. He was there to discuss his new film, a drama about loss and redemption that had already earned rave reviews at festivals. Eastwood was known for his directness but also his kindness, a man who kept his word and respected others. Across from him sat Joy Behar, whose reputation as a provocateur preceded her. Her red hair contrasted sharply with the cold glint in her eyes, and her smile felt more like a challenge than a welcome. Joy was a master of sharp remarks, and her ability to push guests out of their comfort zones was legendary. But whispers backstage hinted that she had something special planned this time. Producers exchanged nervous glances, and the other hosts, Whoopi Goldberg and Sarah Haynes, looked slightly uneasy, as if sensing an approaching storm. The cameras took their positions, and the show began. Clint, welcome to The View. Joy Behar started with a wide smile, but her voice carried a subtle edge of irony. Your new film is already being called a masterpiece. Tell us, what inspired you? Eastwood nodded, his voice low and steady as always. Thank you, Joy. This film is about human resilience, about finding meaning after loss. I wanted to tell a story that touches hearts. The audience applauded, but Joy quickly shifted gears. Her eyes narrowed and her smile sharpened. That's very touching, Clint, but let's talk about something else. You speak a lot about supporting veterans, your foundations for them. That's your pride and joy, right? Eastwood nodded, his expression calm. Yes, I've supported veterans for years. They're people who deserve our respect and help. Joy leaned closer, her voice turning sharper. Oh, absolutely. But, there are rumors. Some say your foundations, how should I put it, aren't as altruistic as you claim. Word is, a significant chunk of that money goes not to veterans but to you. What do you say to that? The studio froze. A cameraman backstage nearly dropped his equipment. Eastwood's face hardened, his jaw clenched, but he maintained his composure. Joy, that's a serious accusation. My foundations are transparent, and every cent goes to supporting veterans. I don't take a dime. You can check the reports. Joy didn't back down. Her voice dripped with sarcasm, her words like sharp arrows aimed at a weak spot. Oh, Clint, let's not hide behind reports. People are saying you use these foundations as a front. You're a Hollywood star. Everything you do is about image. Doesn't it seem like veterans deserve the truth? Like, why does half the money, as they say, end up in your pockets? The audience gasped. Sarah Haynes covered her mouth, and Whoopi Goldberg shot Joy an outraged look. Joy, that's too far, Whoopi muttered, but Joy ignored her. I'm just voicing what people want to know, Joy pressed on. You've built this hero image, but isn't it time to admit it's all a performance? You're not a saint, Clint. Aren't you tired of pretending? Eastwood's fists clenched on his knees. His eyes, which had seen thousands of scenes, now burned with quiet anger. But he responded measuredly, weighing each word. Joy, I'm not pretending. I do what I believe is right. You're throwing around accusations without evidence, and that's not journalism. That's slander. The audience erupted in applause, but Joy merely scoffed. Slander? Oh, please, Clint, you're dodging the truth. People want to know why your foundations are so opaque. Why don't you let independent auditors check where the money goes? Are you afraid we'll find out how you've profited off veterans? It was like a punch below the belt. The air in the studio grew heavy, as if on the verge of an explosion. Producers backstage began whispering frantically, one waving a hand to try to stop Joy. But she paid no attention. Whoopi tried to intervene again. Joy, enough! This isn't fair. But Eastwood raised a hand, silencing her. His voice was quiet but firmer than granite. Joy, you're crossing a line. My foundations help thousands of veterans, and I'm proud of that work. You have no right to accuse me of stealing without proof. This isn't a show. These are real people and real lives. Joy, sensing she was losing control, went all in. Oh, Clint, don't play the victim. You think you can come here, hide behind your reputation, and avoid accountability? People deserve to know the truth about your charitable schemes. You're just an old actor using veterans to look like a hero. Those words struck like lightning. Eastwood's face flared with anger, but his eyes held not just rage but deep hurt. He slowly rose from his chair, his figure even more imposing under the blinding spotlights. The studio fell silent, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. Even Joy seemed to realize she'd gone too far, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. Joy, Eastwood began, his voice low but cutting like cold steel. I came here to talk about a film, about art that can inspire people. But you've turned this into a circus. You think you can baselessly accuse me of stealing from veterans? You think your words matter? You're wrong. The audience erupted in applause, louder than before. But Eastwood didn't stop. He took a step forward, his gaze locked on Joy. I've lived a long life. I've made mistakes, but I've never stooped to using others for fame. My foundations are open to audits, and I invite anyone to see where the money goes. But you, Joy, have shown who you are today. This isn't about truth. It's about your need to tear others down to feel important. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but the words caught in her throat. Her face reddened with anger and humiliation. She tried to retort, Clint, you can't just... But Eastwood cut her off. I'm done, Joy. I'm not playing your games. He turned to the audience. Thank you for your support, but I won't stay where there's no respect. With that, he removed his microphone, tossed it onto the table, and headed for the exit. The studio exploded in applause, but the tension hung heavy in the air. Joy sat stunned, her face a mix of anger and shock. Whoopi Goldberg quickly called for a commercial break, but it was clear this moment would go down in history. To be continued in part 2. Did Clint Eastwood do the right thing by walking off the set, or should he have stayed to continue the fight? What do you think of Joy Behar's behavior? Were her questions justified, or was it just a desire to humiliate a star for ratings? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to learn more about behind-the-scenes dramas. The studio of The View teetered on the edge of chaos. Clint Eastwood stood tall, his presence radiating quiet but undeniable strength. His words to Joy Behar still echoed in the air, and the audience, holding their breath, waited for what would come next. Joy, her face flushed with anger and humiliation, struggled to find words to fight back. Her voice trembled as she finally spoke, trying to regain control. "Clint, don't be so dramatic," she said, her tone sharp but tinged with uncertainty. "I'm just asking the questions people want to hear. If you're so transparent, why not tell us more about your foundations? Why are you dodging answers?" the audience murmured, but this time their reaction was mixed. Some clapped for Eastwood, others whispered, stunned by Joy's audacity. Whoopi Goldberg, seated nearby, tried to intervene again, her voice tense. "Joy, enough. This isn't fair and you know it." But Joy, as if cornered, only doubled down. She tossed her hair back and leaned forward, her eyes glinting with defiance. "Oh, Whoopi, don't defend him. Clint, you think you can just stand there, look noble, and avoid accountability? People have a right to know if you're using veterans as a cover to enrich yourself." Her words were like gasoline poured onto a fire. Eastwood's face grew sterner. His eyes narrowed, but he didn't lose his composure. He slowly crossed his arms, his voice remaining calm but laced with power. "Joy, you're repeating accusations with no basis, in fact. You want the truth? My foundations help thousands of veterans every year, from medical care to housing. Every dollar is accounted for, and I'm ready to open those records to any audit. But that's not what you want, is it? You want a scandal, you want headlines. And for that, you're willing to ruin the reputation of those who work for others." The audience erupted in applause, louder than ever. Some even stood, shouting words of support. But Joy wouldn't relent. Her voice turned even more sarcastic, almost venomous. "Oh, please, Clint. You're such a saint, aren't you? But let's look at the numbers. You say your foundations help thousands, but how do we know it's not just pretty words? Maybe you're taking your cut to fund your lavish homes or new films. Why not prove you're clean, right here and now?" The tension in the studio reached a boiling point. Producers backstage looked frantic, one speaking urgently into a headset, trying to decide whether to stop the show. Sarah Haynes sat with her lips pressed tight, her face a mix of shock and discomfort. Whoopi tried to intervene again, her voice firmer this time. "Joy, you've gone too far. This isn't journalism, it's bullying." But Eastwood raised a hand, silencing her. His gaze was locked on Joy, and in his eyes burned not just hurt, but deep resolve. "Whoopi, thank you, but I'll handle this," he said quietly, his voice cutting through the studio. Then he turned back to Joy. "You want proof? I don't carry accounting books with me, but I can tell you one thing. I've never taken a cent from those foundations. And if you really cared about veterans, not ratings, you'd be supporting that work, not trying to tear it down." Those words marked a turning point. The audience exploded in applause, drowning out everything. Some shouted, "Bravo, Clint!" while others clapped fiercely in support. Joy, however, couldn't stop. Her face twisted with anger, and she launched into one final attack, her voice trembling with frustration. "You're dodging the question, Clint. You think you can stand there, play the hero, and make everyone believe you're flawless? People aren't fools. They know nobody in Hollywood does anything for free. Tell the truth. How much are you making off those foundations?" It was too much. Eastwood took a step forward, his figure even more imposing under the blazing spotlights. He slowly removed the microphone from his shirt, holding it in his hand like a weapon. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried a force that made the entire studio freeze. "Joy," he began, his voice low but sharp as cold steel. "I came here to talk about a film, about art that can inspire people. But you've turned this into a dirty circus. You think you can baselessly accuse me of stealing from veterans? You think your words matter? You're wrong." The audience roared with applause, louder than before. But Eastwood wasn't done. He took another step forward, his gaze locked on Joy. I've lived a long life. I've seen wars. I've seen people sacrifice everything for others. I created those foundations to help those who came home broken, because I believe in them. But you? You stand here throwing mud with no proof just because you need a scandal. You're not seeking truth. You're seeking a way to humiliate me because that sells. But I won't play your games. I won't let you use veterans as a weapon against me. He paused, his gaze piercing Joy, who sat stunned, unable to respond. Then he continued, his voice growing even more powerful. Real strength isn't about shouting louder than everyone else. It's about staying true to your principles, even when someone tries to tear you down. You've shown the world who you are, Joy, and I won't stay here to be part of this circus. With that, Eastwood tossed the microphone onto the table. The sound of it hitting echoed like a gunshot. He turned and walked toward the exit, his steps confident, his back straight as a young soldier's. The audience erupted in cheers, people rising from their seats, chanting his name. Joy sat frozen, her face a mix of anger, shock, and humiliation. Whoopi Goldberg quickly called for a commercial break, her voice trembling with tension, as producers backstage scrambled to salvage the situation. As the doors closed behind Eastwood, the studio buzzed with emotion long after. This confrontation became more than just a moment on television. It became a symbol of dignity standing against toxicity. Clint Eastwood walked away with his honor and principles intact, while Joy Behar was left exposed, her willingness to humiliate others for ratings laid bare. Her baseless accusations only highlighted her cynicism, while Eastwood showed that true strength lies in staying true to oneself, even under pressure. The moment shook the media landscape. On social platforms, Eastwood's fans praised his courage, while critics called Joy's behavior shameful and irresponsible. The event served as a stark reminder of how easily media can become a battleground for personal attacks and the importance of defending one's dignity in the face of injustice. Eastwood didn't just leave the studio, he left behind a legacy of a man who refused to be diminished for someone else's ambition. Subscribe to learn more about behind-the-scenes dramas and share your thoughts on how media shapes our view of stars. Did Eastwood do the right thing by walking off? Or should he have stayed to prove his point? What does this story tell us about the limits of journalism and respect for others? Share your thoughts in the comments. Did Clint Eastwood make the right choice by walking off the set of The View? Or should he have stayed to fight Joy Behar's baseless accusations? Do you think her behavior was a justified attempt to get to the truth? Or was it just a desire to create a scandal for ratings? How should media balance provocative questions with respect for their guests? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to catch more stories about the dramas in the world of stars. It was an evening that promised to go down in history, a moment that shook the media and forever changed how talk shows were perceived. No one could have predicted that a routine interview on the popular show, The Nightly Spotlight, would erupt into a fiery confrontation between two Hollywood legends, Clint Eastwood and Robert De Niro. Both stars arrived to promote their new projects, expecting a friendly conversation. But what unfolded was a clash that changed everything. This was a moment that rocked the world. Subscribe and leave a comment because this story will shock you. The show started on a light note. Allison, holding her cue cards, addressed both guests with a warm smile. Clint, Robert, welcome to the Nightly Spotlight. Her voice was soft but professional. Clint, your new film, Last Horizon, is already being called a masterpiece. Tell us, what inspired you? Eastwood leaned back in his chair, his voice low and measured. It's a story about a man who's lost everything but finds meaning in helping others, he said. I wanted to show that even in the darkest times, there's hope if you stay true to yourself. The audience applauded, and Allison turned to De Niro. And you, Robert? Your new thriller, Shadows of Truth, promises to keep audiences on edge. What was the toughest part of this role? De Niro shrugged, his smile slightly ironic. Tough? Probably making people believe I can be anyone other than Robert De Niro, he joked, eliciting laughter from the crowd. But then his gaze slid to Eastwood, and a subtle edge crept into his tone. But you know, Clint, I watched your film, and I thought, same old hero. Lone wolf with a heart of gold. Don't you ever get tired of that? The question hung in the air, sharp as a blow. The audience fell silent, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Allison leaned forward slightly, as if feeling the change, but chose not to intervene. Eastwood narrowed his eyes, but his voice remained calm. I tell stories that matter to me, Bobby, he replied, using the diminutive form of De Niro's name with a hint of irony. If people like them, I'm doing something right. De Niro laughed, but the laugh was sharp, almost mocking. Oh, people like it, that's for sure, he said, leaning back in his chair. But let's be honest, Clint. You've built a career on the tough guy image. Revolvers, squinting eyes. That's not really you, is it? It's just a mask you've been wearing for 60 years. The audience gasped, and Allison quickly interjected. Robert, let's get back to your projects, she said, but her voice was uncertain. No, Allison, let's talk about this, De Niro cut in, not taking his eyes off Eastwood. I just want to know, have you ever been real, Clint? Or is it all just a performance for the crowd? Eastwood sat motionless, his fingers lightly gripping the armrests of his chair. His face remained impassive, but a spark of surprise and barely restrained irritation flickered in his eyes. The audience held their breath, feeling the tension thicken like fog before a storm. Producers in the corner exchanged anxious glances, and one of the camera operators nearly dropped his equipment, hurriedly adjusting the angle. I've never claimed to be my characters, Eastwood replied slowly, his voice quiet but laced with steel. My job is to tell stories, not live them. What about you, Bobby? You're not exactly a Bronx taxi driver, are you? The audience erupted in nervous laughter, but De Niro didn't flinch. His smile widened, almost predatory. Nice shot, Clint, he said, clapping his hands. But the difference is I don't hide behind one image. I take risky roles, try new things. And you? You just keep doing the same thing. Westerns, dramas, heroes. It's safe, isn't it? An easy way to stay the crowd's favorite. Allison tried to intervene again, her voice trembling with tension. Guys, maybe we can talk about your new films, she said, but De Niro waved her off, dismissing her like an annoying fly. No, Allison, let's talk about something real, he said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Clint, you're known for your charity work. Millions for children's hospitals, veterans. But tell me, is that really from the heart? Or is it just a way to look good when your career's starting to fade? The question hit like a physical blow. The audience gasped, some whispering, others shaking their heads in indignation. One of the producers in the corner covered his face with his hands, as if anticipating disaster. Eastwood clenched his jaw, his gaze sharpening like a blade. I do what I think is right, he replied, his voice low and controlled, but with a growing edge of tension. If you want to call it PR, that's your business. But I'm not sitting here throwing accusations for attention. De Niro leaned back, his smile growing more sarcastic. Attention? He repeated, raising his eyebrows. Oh, Clint, you know how this game works. We all play it. But you act like you're above it. St. Clint Eastwood, who never makes mistakes. Let's talk about your political views. You've supported some, let's say, controversial ideas, haven't you? Or is that just part of your heroic image? The audience was in shock, some whispering, others applauding, but most sat in tense silence. Allison Robert, Clint, let's focus on respecting each other, she said, but her voice was lost in the mounting tension between the two stars. Eastwood sat still, but his eyes were blazing. His fingers gripped the armrests so tightly that his knuckles whitened. The tension in the studio was unbearable, like the air before an explosion. The audience waited, holding their breath, while producers scrambled in panic, exchanging messages. Allison looked as though she wanted to flee the stage but stayed, clutching her cue cards like a lifeline. Bobby, Eastwood began, his voice quiet but each word cutting through the silence like a gunshot. I'm not claiming perfection. I've lived 95 years doing what I believe in. I've made films that made people think, feel, argue. I've helped people because I thought it was right, not for headlines. And you? You're standing here throwing accusations because you need attention to feel alive. The audience erupted in applause, but Eastwood raised a hand, calling for silence. His eyes never left De Niro, who sat with clenched jaws. "I'm not hiding behind an image," Eastwood continued, his voice growing stronger but still controlled. "I don't pretend to be perfect, but I don't let people like you define who I am. You call it PR? Then tell me, Bobby, what have you done besides playing gangsters and yelling at anyone who disagrees with you?" De Niro leapt from his chair, his face flushed with anger. "Don't you dare say that to me," he shouted. "I've taken risks in my career, taken roles no one else dared to. And you? You're just repeating the same thing, Clint. You're stuck in the past." Eastwood took a step closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper, yet it felt even more powerful. "Maybe I'm stuck in the past," he said. "But I know who I am. And you, Bobby, you're so busy proving your importance that you've forgotten what it means to be human. You want to humiliate me for ratings? Fine, but you just showed the world who you really are." With that, Eastwood turned and walked off the stage, this time for good. The audience erupted in cheers that drowned out Allison's feeble attempts to steer the show back on track. De Niro remained standing, his face a mix of anger and humiliation. He tried to say something, but his voice was lost in the roar of applause. Allison, realizing the show couldn't be saved, called for another commercial break, her face pale with shock. This confrontation became a turning point for both stars. Clint Eastwood, by walking off the stage, preserved his dignity, showing that true strength lies in self-respect and refusing to play toxic media games. His words, filled with quiet confidence, became an anthem for those who stand firm against unfair attacks. Robert De Niro, on the other hand, paid a steep price for his impulsiveness. His accusations, meant to elevate him, instead exposed his own insecurities and need for attention. That evening was a reminder that in a world where media often feeds on scandal, dignity and principles remain the most powerful weapons. Subscribe to learn more about behind-the-scenes dramas and share your thoughts in the comments. Did Clint Eastwood do the right thing by leaving the studio, or should he have stayed to fight? What do you think of Robert De Niro's behavior? Was it just an emotional outburst or a deliberate attempt to humiliate a colleague? How do you think this confrontation will affect their careers? Share your thoughts in the comments. After Clint Eastwood's shocking exit from the nightly spotlight stage, the studio descended into chaos, and viewers at home were glued to their screens. The confrontation between two Hollywood legends, Eastwood, the Western icon and director with unyielding dignity, and Robert De Niro, whose impulsive attack stunned everyone, became the talk of headlines worldwide. But what happened after Clint left the stage? Would De Niro try to justify himself or double down on his attack? And how would this moment reshape their careers? This second part reveals the aftermath, the emotional climax, and the moral lesson left in the wake of the storm. Subscribe and leave a comment, because this story is far from over. As Clint Eastwood disappeared behind the curtain, the nightly spotlight studio plunged into chaos. The blinding spotlights, which moments ago created an illusion of warmth, now felt too harsh, exposing the tension hanging in the air. The audience buzzed. Some cheered for Eastwood, shouting words of support, while others whispered, shocked by De Niro's behavior. Cameras scrambled to capture every angle, and producers frantically exchanged messages, trying to figure out how to salvage the show. The host, Allison Crowe, stood on stage, clutching her cue cards so tightly they crumpled. Her face betrayed confusion, but she forced a smile, announcing a commercial break. Robert De Niro remained in his chair, his face a mix of anger and embarrassment. His signature smile was gone, replaced by a tense expression, as if he were only now realizing the magnitude of what had happened. His hands nervously gripped the armrests, his gaze darting between the audience and the empty chair where Eastwood had sat. Backstage, Clint, calm but with blazing eyes, strode down the corridor, ignoring producers begging him to return. His steps were measured, but each one carried the resolute determination of a man who refused to be humiliated. After the commercial break, the show resumed, but the atmosphere was different. Allison, trying to steer the conversation back to safety, turned to De Niro with a forced smile. "Robert," she began cautiously, "maybe we can talk about your new film, Shadows of Truth? Tell us, what inspired this role?" De Niro, however, wasn't ready to back down. His eyes still burned with anger, and he brushed off the question. "You know, Allison, I don't want to talk about the film," he said sharply, his voice laced with irritation. "I want to talk about what just happened. Clint Eastwood just walked off the stage like a coward. If he can't handle an honest conversation, maybe he shouldn't be here." The audience gasped, and a few people began to shout in protest. Allison looked stunned, her hands trembling as she tried to regain control. "Robert, I think we're all a bit shaken," she said, her voice tense. "Let's try to focus on the positive. Your film—" "Positive," De Niro interrupted, his tone growing sharper. "I'm tired of this hypocrisy. Clint wants everyone to think he's a hero, but he's just an old actor afraid of the truth. He's been playing the same character his whole life, on screen and off. And I said it to his face." The audience erupted in a mix of applause and indignant shouts. Some supported De Niro's bluntness, but most seemed shocked. A producer backstage waved frantically, urging Allison to stop him, but she was powerless. De Niro pressed on, his words growing more personal. "I've seen his charity work," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Millions for veterans, hospitals. But come on, it's just PR. He's doing it to look good as his films lose their shine. And his political views? Don't make me laugh, Clint. You've backed ideas that divide people, then act like a saint." Allison tried to intervene, her voice trembling. "Robert, let's respect each other," she said. "Clint has a right to his views, just as you do." "Respect?" De Niro shot back, his eyes blazing with anger. "Respect is earned, Allison, and Clint's just hiding behind his image. I only spoke the truth." At that moment, the backstage doors swung open, and Clint Eastwood unexpectedly returned to the stage. The audience exploded in applause, but his face was stern, his gaze sharp as a blade. He didn't sit but stood before De Niro, his presence even more commanding under the bright spotlights. "You want the truth, Bobby?" His voice was quiet, but each word cut through the silence like a gunshot. "The truth is, I've lived 95 years doing what I believe in. I've made films that made people think, feel, argue. I've helped people because I thought it was right, not for headlines. And you? You're standing here throwing accusations because you need attention to feel alive." The audience erupted in applause, but Eastwood raised a hand, calling for silence. His eyes never left De Niro, who sat with clenched jaws. "I'm not hiding behind an image," Eastwood continued, his voice growing stronger but still controlled. "I don't pretend to be perfect, but I don't let people like you define who I am. You call it PR? Then tell me, Bobby, what have you done besides playing gangsters and yelling at anyone who disagrees with you?" De Niro leapt from his chair, his face flushed with anger. "Don't you dare say that to me," he shouted. "I've taken risks in my career, taken roles no one else dared to. And you? You're just repeating the same thing, Clint. You're stuck in the past." Eastwood took a step closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper, yet it felt even more powerful. "Maybe I am stuck in the past," he said. "But I know who I am. And you, Bobby, you're so busy proving your importance that you've forgotten what it means to be human. You want to humiliate me for ratings? Fine. But you just showed the world who you really are." With that, Eastwood turned and walked off the stage, this time for good. The audience erupted in cheers that drowned out Allison's feeble attempts to steer the show back on track. De Niro remained standing, his face a mix of anger and humiliation. He tried to say something, but his voice was lost in the roar of applause. Allison, realizing the show couldn't be saved, called for another commercial break, her face pale with shock. This confrontation became a turning point for both stars. Clint Eastwood, by returning to the stage to defend his dignity, showed that true strength lies in self-respect and staying true to one's principles. His words, filled with quiet confidence, became an anthem for those who refused to play toxic media games. Robert De Niro, on the other hand, paid a steep price for his impulsiveness. His accusations, meant to elevate him, instead exposed his own insecurities and need for attention. That evening was a reminder that in a world where media often feeds on scandal, dignity and principles remain the most powerful weapons. Subscribe to learn more about behind-the-scenes dramas and share your thoughts in the comments. Did Clint Eastwood do the right thing by returning to the stage to confront De Niro, or should he have just walked away? Do you think Robert De Niro crossed a line, or were his accusations justified? How do you think this confrontation will affect their careers? Share your thoughts in the comments.